Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. We are super excited that you are joining us for today's episode of the show because today's interview is a good one.
Yeah, today we are going to be talking to Cam and Natasha from The World Pursuit. And it was actually fun because Cam and Natasha are based here in Canmore. We were able to do this interview in person, which was great after lots of Zoom calls in the past couple months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've done more Zoom calls in the past 6-7 months throughout this pandemic than we've ever done before. And that's saying a lot since we've worked from home for the last 5 years. But diving into this interview, we are going to talk about Cam and Natasha's travel story, what it was like setting out as full-time travelers, how they built a business around that, and how they were able to build a blog that has enabled them to continue traveling the world. We also talk about why they ended up in Canmore, Alberta when they are not from here, and what things have been like over the last couple of months. So this interview is jam-packed. They've got tons of cool information to share. We're diving into what it was like to cross Africa overland, traveling the world as a couple, and so much more. So we hope that you really enjoy this episode of the show.
Yeah, and just quickly before we get started, we want to quickly remind you about the World Wanderers Insider because we also have an episode with Cam and Natasha that will be going out on the Insider next week if you're listening to this on the Thursday it's released, or will already be out. And so we're going to be talking about the behind the scenes of building a profitable travel blog that allows you to travel and explore the world. Cam and Natasha are full-time travel bloggers. And so they share what their process was like building the World Pursuit and if they were starting over in 2020, what they would do. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can go to patreon.com/theworldwanderers to get access to the World Wanderers Insider podcast where you'll get great episodes like that and so many others on digital nomad life and other things upcoming. So go over to patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
All right, now here's the interview with Cam and Natasha. Welcome to the podcast today, Cam and Natasha. We're super excited to have you here with us today.
Yeah, awesome to be here. It's been great getting to know you guys too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is actually really fun because we're in person. So for everyone listening, normally we have people on the computer who are located in various different places around the world. And Cam and Natasha actually live in the same place as us, which is Canmore, Alberta. And we definitely want to hear how you guys ended up here, but maybe we'll back up a little bit. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about your travel stories, how you guys got inspired to start traveling?
Yeah, absolutely. It all kind of goes back to when we first met in college.
Yeah.
And Natasha had these plans to start traveling.
When I was younger, my parents didn't really travel or anything. We kind of did the typical American vacations, the Caribbean, Jamaica, a few cruises. So I didn't have a lot of international travel under my belt. But I went to school and I studied abroad in Australia. And when I was there, I fell into a group of friends and they were all Europeans and all Australians. And I realized that Americans don't travel as much as almost everyone else in the world. So all the Europeans had taken gap years, and all the Australians had taken gap years, and they had all seen all these amazing countries, and I hadn't been anywhere. So I made a vow that after I finished college, I was going to go travel. So I finished college, or I worked all the way through college with this goal to hit a certain amount of money so I could leave and go backpacking around the world. And then I met Cameron at a bar.
Naturally,
Very romantic. About a week before I was graduating. And I liked him. He's a pretty cute guy.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I had a few drinks under my belt. And I said, well, I'm leaving for Europe. So if you want to join me, then feel free.
And of course, I said yes. So we met in Norway. And I always never forget this because the name of the town was called Stavanger. But because we were both Americans and it's like Norwegian, we kept calling it Stavanger. So I kept telling everyone I was going to Stavanger, Norway. And obviously people had no idea where that was because we were pronouncing it incorrectly. So I hopped on this flight to meet her, and I'll never forget landing at the airport and being so nervous because I was like, what if she doesn't show up? Like, I just flew to this country. I don't really know her. And I'm like, I almost forgot what she looked like. I'll never forget. I'm like looking at her Facebook profile. I'm like, okay. This is what she looks like. I can't get this wrong. And then sure enough, she showed up, and then we spent the next 6 weeks, 2 months, I think.
Yeah, we were traveling around Europe together. And so prior to Europe, we'd only been on 2 really dates. And then we traveled around Europe together for about 2 months, just backpacking. The idea was if we didn't like each other, we could just always split. Like, we were going to just travel solo. I had plans to do that anyway. And if we did like each other, then things would blossom. So
Yeah.
that's where that went.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's a really cool story that you guys were able to do that like so soon after getting to know each other. And like while you guys were there, what was kind of your plan for afterwards? I'm imagining I hadn't talked about that either, but kind of how did things develop while you were traveling?
Well, we'd actually met through mutual friends. So Natasha was in the film program in school, and my friends were in the film program as well. And I'd been working in the film industry, which is kind of how I had those connections. And we just both had that passion for working in the film industry. So the idea was I hadn't graduated school yet at the end of our trip, so I had to go back to university and finish. And she was going to keep traveling. And then we were thinking maybe some point we'd move into the film industry and start real jobs, which we eventually did when she finished up her trip 8 months later. So she traveled for about a year, and then we moved to New York City to begin our career in film production.
Yeah, pretty much that was it. I mean, after 8 months of traveling, like he'd been flown back and forth a few times to wherever I was to meet me throughout these 8 months. And then when we returned, I mean, the next step felt to go get real jobs, since we both graduated from college and just seemed naturally the next choice. So we moved to New York City, and we both started our careers in the film industry. Obviously, I miss travel quite a bit.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. Like, I feel like it's like once you've gotten a taste for travel, you're kind of always trying to make your life like be as fulfilling as that is. As I'm curious like what that transition was like coming back from travel, getting these jobs. Like, did you enjoy what you were doing, or were you immediately like, okay, we want to go again?
So our stories, we felt differently on this. I had just had this idea that I wanted to travel and live this awesome life, and social media wasn't as big back then, but I was looking at lots of blogs and just seeing other people living this digital nomad life, and they were just seemed to be gallivanting around the world. So every time I was at my job, I would sneak off onto other websites when I was supposed to be working and dream about travel. Cameron felt differently.
Yeah, I still have a passion for film production. I mean, obviously we live the life we do now, and no regrets, but at the time I was really enjoying my job. I found it fulfilling. It was intensive. Like I was working about 60 hours a week. But it was competitive and interesting and technical, and I liked those things, so I found it fulfilling in that way. But I'll never forget, New York can be pretty brutal sometimes when it comes to the weather, and it was February, actually it was Valentine's Day, and it had been snowing so much in New York that month, and it had actually been like the record-breaking coldest month in New York in like, I want to say like 40 or 50 years or something. So she looked at me and she's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. This place sucks, more or less. She's like, you can either come with me or you can stay and continue to work your job. So we kind of made this plan that we would leave together. We were going to finish out our lease, which was in the summer. So we spent another 4 or 5 months working our jobs and then put in our 2-week notice, quit our jobs because we'd had enough money saved, and decided we're going to take off and start traveling again.
Yeah, so we devised this plan on, thankfully he agreed to come with me, but we devised this plan on Valentine's Day to just save as much money as we could, to lock down, to not go out to dinner, to not have drinks, pretty much like not have much of a social life or much of any fun, just work and put everything in the bank so we could leave and go travel for as long as we could off that savings.
Yeah, and so we can definitely relate to that experience and kind of that, like, those stages of kind of finishing university, going on a big trip, and that's kind of more of like, I feel kind of a socially acceptable thing of like, oh, cool, yeah, an adventure before you settle down. And then kind of working for a while, and then we're like, no, screw this, we want to go do something adventurous again. That's kind of where it can get scary, I think, for like people around you or even for you, right? Like, I remember thinking at that stage, because we quit and didn't have a plan really, we're like, we're just going to go to South America, it'll be awesome. But kind of having this fear of like, oh, am I going to be able to start a career after? What am I going to do for a job? Were you guys thinking about that type of stuff? Or what was kind of your thoughts on like leaving behind those first jobs and focusing on travel?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
I was super intimidated, first off. I never forget going in to put in my 2 weeks because I just gotten a job promotion. So like right afterwards, it's like literally a week after, I was like, okay, well, I appreciate this, but I'm quitting.
Thanks, bye.
Yeah, it's great and all. But we were really fortunate, I think, because we both worked in the film industry, and film industry is naturally kind of freelance. So like it's pretty cyclical, and it's very common for people to work 9 months and then take 3 months off and then work 6 months because you're working on different projects and it's kind of rotating. So it's really freelance. So like I felt when we quit, like if we wanted to, we could still come back and go into the film industry. And like it kind of felt like that was kind of like our on the back burner, like this kind of this parachute that we had because we had this skill set.
Yeah, I didn't think too much about it. I just remember thinking we're still pretty young, like we'll be able to make something happen.
And so you guys head out on this big trip. Where do you go first?
Riga, Latvia.
Okay.
Which honestly, I didn't know anything about Riga, Latvia. I didn't even have many desires to go there. I'm not saying it's a bad place. It was just never on my list. But it was the cheapest flight into Europe. So pretty much at the time, we were on a budget. We were just looking for any way to get onto the continent because once you're in Europe, it's very, very easy to travel around. So I found a flight for $250 one way, and that's where we went. And we explored Riga, and then we went to the Baltics, and we just kind of bus, trained, Ryan-aired everywhere around the continent that we could, all on a budget. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's cool because we did something similar. Like I remember staying in hostels and doing like the free hostel breakfast, like whatever they were, we ate them. And then we would go get like sandwich fixings for lunch. And then we would be like, okay, we can have some like good local food for dinner. So we basically only spent money on like one meal a day. And I'm grateful to not be quite so in that phase of my life anymore. But it's nice to be able to, make your money stretch further so that you're able to see more stuff and make those adventures last longer.
Yeah, at the time, like you really don't care what you're eating because it's not about your breakfast. It's about what you get to do with your budget elsewhere. So we feel you.
For sure, yeah. It's so much easier when you can like have something you really want to do to spend your money on. And it's not like, I don't know, sometimes you're at home, you're making money and you just kind of spend your money because you're not like, you can't connect it to the purpose versus you're traveling and you're like, oh, if I save here, I can get a hostel in, I don't know, Belarus for $17 a night.
Yeah, exactly. The first few months of our travels, probably the first year of this initial trip, we were on a tight budget. Hosteling, trying to find, $5-7 rooms.
Yeah, we were doing $30 a day. Like we were trying to keep it about $1,000 a month. So it was a pretty tight budget, but we were totally capable of doing it. And when you're traveling in the cheaper destinations, there's lots of options for, as you say, free breakfast at the hostel. It's typically instant coffee and buttered toast or cereal.
Cornflakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nutritional, yeah.
And so were you guys blogging right from the start of that trip, or was that something that kind of came up along the way?
So as I mentioned, when I was having my travel daydreams at my job in New York, I was looking at a bunch of travel blogs, and all these bloggers were saying that they were actually making money on their travel blog. At the time, I had no idea how. I didn't understand how blogs made money, but I figured if they could do it, then we could do it too. So I told Cam, like, we should start a travel blog, just update our friends and family with what we're doing. Maybe it'll turn out like turn into some free trip offers. Maybe some kayaking company will take us on a free kayaking tour on a lake.
That's an oddly specific hypothetical future.
We don't know. I remember one of our first comped experiences was a bike tour in Serbia.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
And that was great for us. We were like, oh, we're getting like free little tours around. We weren't making any money at this point, but we were getting free tours with local operators for exposure and write-ups on our blog. And so, we started our blog about a month before we left on this initial trip, and we just kept working on it, not really knowing what we were doing, honestly, for a good 6 months.
And the ultimate goal was just to cover our expenses. Like if we kept thinking, if we can just make it to like, if we can make like $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, we'll cover our expenses and we can just keep traveling indefinitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And at what point did that happen where you guys hit like, okay, we're making that $1,000, like we're covering our expenses?
I want to say about 6 months in, we were making a little bit of money. Like it wasn't a lot. I want to say maybe we hit our first $500. And to make that while traveling and working remotely, like we thought it was the most awesome thing in the world, like to make money online, even if it was just $500. Felt great.
It was still like, we always like to tell people, it was like taking an unpaid internship for your first year. Mm-hmm. So you work really hard on it and you don't really have an idea of what you're doing. And then by the end of that year, maybe you start making some money. But we probably didn't make much until 2 years in, and we were pretty much coasting off our savings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love the idea of thinking about it as an unpaid internship, and especially like nowadays. I mean, you guys probably hear from a lot of people who are like, "How do I do what you're doing too?" And it's people want instant, right? Mm-hmm. You want instant gratification, instant likes, instant money, and that's not how these things happen. Like it takes a lot of hard work. So I definitely appreciate you guys sharing that with listeners.
It's a marathon, not a race. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so what was it like, because you had obviously lots of travels before, whether solo, together, that were more just that like free vacation-y style, and then trying to like build in some career to that travel experience. What was that kind of like? Were you finding it was matching all of those expectations you had during winter in New York, or was it different?
I think it starts off really awesome. Like we really enjoyed, and I still get a lot of enjoyment out of blogging and traveling at the same time. But then when it turns into more of a job over time, it turns into a job, and then which is kind of how we come back to settling down eventually, is like it just became working and traveling at the same time, and we weren't able to enjoy our travels because we were working while we were traveling. So we needed to like delineate, this is a travel period where we're going to just go and enjoy ourselves and take photos and collect content, and then a work period where we'll settle down and we'll write blog posts and work on that.
Yeah, it was really a progression. Like when we first started, we didn't know what we were doing. It was a brand new job to us, but some things that were different between taking this job more seriously and then just traveling around the world for fun. We took more photos. So like our previous trip when we were backpacking right out of college, I have barely any photos from that trip because we didn't have anywhere to put them. It was like, when you take photos, you don't really know what you're doing with them. So we have no photos from that trip. And so when we started the blog, it was instantly like, we were trying to get more photos. We were trying to do more things where we might not have, like, we are making an effort to go on tours, to do as much as we can, rather than kind of just walking around a city for fun, just so we could have that content for our website. So that was different.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's funny as you guys are saying that, it makes me think about some of our travel experiences and trying to like balance those two things. And you're like, oh, we got to make a podcast episode about this city, but we just went to like Starbucks 3 times and didn't actually do anything.
Hey, you've definitely got to be more intentional. And like, there's nothing wrong with going to Starbucks. Like as long-term travelers, I'm sure you guys can relate to, sometimes you just don't want to do anything, which I know sounds maybe to somebody who only has a couple weeks vacation like a very privileged thing, but I think as humans, we need these points of relaxation. Like there have definitely been points in our travels where I'm like, I just want to lie inside and watch Netflix. Like that's all I want to do today. And I know that sounds dumb when you're somewhere magical, but sometimes you just need to relax and rejuvenate. And when you're creating content, I feel like you definitely have to be more intentional about like, okay, what do people want to know about this place? And then actually go do that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I just think that's the reality of being a long-term traveler is you don't want to fill your days and with a never-ending itinerary. And I know that you guys do this too, but when we were traveling, we needed times where we could just book an Airbnb for a month so we could stay stationary. We didn't have to worry about catching that bus or catching that train, booking a new hotel day after day. We just wanted to chill with good Wi-Fi and get some work done.
Yeah, and I think the thing with long-term travel and vacation that is really big difference is it's like with travel, because it's your lifestyle, you're always planning. Like it's always the next destination. What are we doing next? What's in the city? It's always something new. Whereas at least with a vacation, you can plan in advance and then you don't have to think about those things. So in your long-term traveling, it just becomes like this constant like rat race. So we're like working, and then on top of working, you're planning the next trip, and then you're moving along. And it's, it can get exhausting.
Yeah, 100%. And so during that first year, like you mentioned, kind of an unpaid internship as you were getting the momentum going on blogging, but still able to explore so many cool places in Europe. Did you guys have any thoughts about, hey, we need to go back to the States? Like, let's forget this idea. Because obviously everything kind of worked out and you built an awesome life kind of as nomads and with travel and exploring the world. Did you think like, okay, this has been cool, but like, let's go back home at any point?
Not really.
Not initially.
No, not initially. So about a year in, we had mostly stayed in Europe. And then we were ready we were ready to keep adventuring. We weren't ready to stop traveling. It was just getting better.
We were actually looking for that adventure because like Europe had kind of became this point where it's like North American culture and European culture feels pretty similar. Like there's some big differences between each country, but like overall we have very similar lifestyles in the West. So we were getting a little tired of it. We're like, this doesn't feel like an adventure anymore. It's like I wake up, I know I can go to the coffee shop. I know what that restaurant's like. Yeah, maybe there's different language, but there's this kind of shared cultural bond that they all have. So we thought, well, let's go somewhere totally different. So we booked one-way tickets to Africa.
Yep, found on one of those flight deal websites, like Scott's Cheap Flights, I don't know, where they email you deals. I found a flight for $450, and you got a 5-day layover in the Seychelles, which didn't sound too shabby.
Not at all.
And you landed in Joburg. So we booked it and we flew to South Africa after a marvelous time in the Seychelles. And we were ready for our next big adventure, which was, at the time, we didn't know what we were doing. We just had this one-way flight, but it turned into quite a big trip around Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long did you guys spend in Africa?
It was about a year.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, so we put our second year was just spent entirely in Africa. We bought a truck eventually. So we started off with a rental car, and like it was like this little tiny truck with 2-wheel drive, and we were taking it into Mozambique. And I'll never forget, we were trying to access this like little lodge that was down by the beach. And as you're going into the lodge, you go through this, like, it's literally like a village with like huts. And we just got stuck in the sand because the roads there are absolutely terrible. So I'll never forget like having to get the villagers to help me push the truck while Natasha's giving it gas to get it out of the sand. So it was like this really big struggle with this rental car. And like, we weren't ready to give up Africa after 2 months or so in this rental car. So we were like, well, let's buy a truck. So we decided to buy a truck and continue on our journey.
Yeah, buying the truck was an adventure in itself. Trying to buy a car in a foreign country has logistical issues. So that turned into a whole month-long ordeal where we just hung out in Cape Town. We eventually linked up with some very good friends now, and they helped us buy our truck in Cape Town. And we had no plans, so we wanted to overland Africa. We aren't very bush savvy. I mean, I'm less bush savvy than Cam. we're not like rough and hardcore or anything. And a lot of people that do this overland trip themselves, they are, and they've grown up somewhere around Africa. Maybe a lot of South Africans do this, but we didn't really have any knowledge. People spend years planning this trip. We had bought the car and we were taking off 2 days later with only mild plans for the next few days. And we linked our trip through 14 countries for a year and camped in the bush and went on safari. And it turned out to be one of their best adventures yet.
It was a proper adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That's like really making me crave some adventure. I'm not going to lie. Canada's great and all, but 6 months in Canada, I'm like, give me to Africa.
We're planning we're sort of planning when we can start travel planning again, a West Africa adventure. So you guys should join.
Yeah, that would be
really
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned it's kind of like a hassle to buy a truck. Can you just like, I didn't even know kind of how that goes in terms of being in a different country. You just buy the truck. How do you get it registered? And then what's it like kind of crossing country to country in Africa and getting like through all the, I don't know what you call it, like booby traps along the way with customs?
Yeah, that was exactly the problem, was getting the car registered to our name. So in South Africa, you needed like this, they call it a TIN, and it's like a traffic identification number, and it corresponds to you. So it's kind of like your number. So if you get a ticket or you have car insurance or anything, you're in the system for that. So we went through all these hurdles and kept applying for it and trying to get it in all these different ways. And eventually we couldn't, they just wouldn't give it to us. So we kind of gave up, and we were at this point where we're like, well, what are we going to do now? And we knew these people that we'd met, and they were really friendly. So we just decided to ask them if they could register the car for us. So we bought the car and registered it in their name, and then just took off. Like, there really isn't too many rules in Africa. So like a lot of places don't even need insurance. They build it into the gas prices. So there's like a gas insurance tax on all of the cars because most people can't afford insurance. So we just took off without much planning.
Yeah, there's a saying in Africa, it's called TIA, and it's this is Africa, and it's just pretty much it's saying like, there's no rules, like there's it's just a lot of who you get at the right time. Like, this is Africa, figure it out. And so that's kind of that was our motto. And we had our friends register the car in their name. They signed over a power of attorney letter granting us authorization to travel with it and to cross borders with it. Little did we know that every single border crossing was going to be hell.
It's like a new game every time. Like,
Yeah.
each place has different rules and regulations, and there's always someone trying to get a bribe at you, or some money changer, or you need to have this currency and we don't have that currency. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, I dreaded the days when we were crossing the border because it was never, ever easy. It was always a whole day affair. Who's going to try and bribe me? Who's going to, what am I going to get taken advantage of? Things like that. But we made it happen.
By the end of it, it felt like a game.
Yeah.
When you first start, you're really intimidated, and then the end is like, they're not going to get me. They're not going to get me. I'm gonna stop this.
I mean, there were even days when we were crossing. I remember we crossed over from Botswana to Zambia, and Cameron went in to try and leave Botswana, and he went with all our paperwork, and I waited probably an hour. Came back out. He said, "Yeah, they won't let us. They won't let us leave Botswana. They're saying we don't have the right paperwork." So I said, "Okay, let me try." So I went in. Sure enough, they let us leave Botswana. It's just there was no rules. It was just who you got and what kind of mood they were in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's interesting. Like, it sounds like there's definitely an adventurous kind of game side of it, like you said, but then also really frustrating.
Oh yeah.
We had some frustrating days.
Yeah. You guys did 14 countries though. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we drove 25,000 kilometers, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
You're probably the first people we've talked to who have traveled that far by land in Africa.
In Africa, for sure.
Yeah.
And so where did you end up finishing?
Kenya. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we had to actually selling the car was almost as much of a pain as buying the car. So there were a lot of border restrictions with the car, specifically if you wanted to get into Kenya, Sudan, and Egypt. And so we knew that we had to sell the car eventually, even though it would have been sweet to like put it on a freight and have it shipped here, because it was an awesome Land Cruiser. And we had to sell the car. We had bought the car for about $4,000, and the goal was to try and get $6,000 for it because it was a
Yeah, it's really funny. They
Yeah.
produce a lot of cars in South Africa, so by the time we got to East Africa, like cars up there are worth like double the value.
Yeah, but we put the car on Facebook, and I had probably over 100 inquiries, some serious, most of them not serious. And we ended up selling the car in Uganda, and we actually had to fly to Kenya because of the border restrictions of bringing a car over the land. Yep.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And then you guys were blogging this entire time?
We were blogging, trying to.
I'm curious about what that was like.
Interesting internet
We would
situations.
often blog from our tent with like 2G signal. Like we found like this sweet spot with the way the tent poles would sit in your tent, where if you put a phone up there, it would like catch a signal. And it was slow internet, but somehow we still managed to make it work.
Yeah, so the idea with the whole Africa trip, I mean, besides it being this awesome adventure that we wanted to go on, was we had never met anyone that had done it. And specifically bloggers, vloggers. So we thought if we did it, we'd be some of the first, and we'd be able to have all this really cool content, providing tips and information for anyone that wanted to follow in our footsteps. So we were updating our blog constantly with travel tips around Africa.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure that that's still probably pretty frequented content on your site.
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
And it's pretty purposeful for us too. As she was saying, we didn't really know anyone that had been doing it. So we also used that to like kind of pitch our story. So we got a lot of media mentions and features in news articles and stuff like that, because we were able to use this content that was unique to kind of sell ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Was that like local media in Africa or back in the States?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we got media mentions in like Travel and Leisure, Forbes, CN Traveler,
Lonely Planet.
and then there were local ones too. I mean, everything was everything we were very, very happy about, because it was really helping us build up our business. And this is what was our second year blogging, so everything was helping. And I look back on that trip and I think we made a great call, business-wise and personal-wise.
Yeah, absolutely. And so after you finished up your Africa trip, what was next for you guys?
Well, we had to go home.
Your parents
were
are
missing
like, hey, we kind of liked these travels, but maybe you could visit a little bit.
And had you not been back to the States at all in those 2 years?
I hadn't.
I don't remember.
No, I think you had a family emergency and you had to return for a week.
I did.
Yeah, but I had not returned. So
Wow.
yeah, our families were getting antsy to see us.
For sure. I can imagine, like, yeah, if you're a parent and your kids, like, overlanding through Africa and you haven't seen them in a year, they'd probably be pretty anxious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if they would have known the half of what we were actually doing, they wouldn't have approved.
My parents always tell us like that, like they feel so comfortable now, because like when we used to travel through Africa, we would go off kind of like offline and off the grid for like a week, 2 weeks at points. And my parents would always be like, they had like that Find My iPhone, and they could find my phone on the GPS. So they'd be like trying to check it and like, oh, look, it updated, it moved. He's still alive. He's moving across Africa.
Thankfully, nothing happened. And, people always ask us if it was a safe trip. And honestly, yes, it was. It was an amazing trip. People were so friendly. The only dangers we ever had were against Mother Nature, not against violence or crime or people hurting us or anything. And so I think that's a common misconception when traveling around developing nations, that your friends and family might not think it's safe, but we found the world is very good. Yep.
Yeah, we've definitely found that as well. And so you guys head home. Did you stay in the US for a while? Where were you guys at that point?
We stayed home for about 6 weeks. Like,
Yeah.
we knew that it wasn't going to be long term. It was really, we needed a reset at the end of traveling around Africa. We were exhausted. It was amazing, but it's very draining. And there was definitely a point where we felt like, we even just felt dirty. Like, I'll never forget, we flew from a little, what was it, a national park in Tanzania, out of the bush, hopped right on a flight, and then flew right back into the States. So it was like leaving from the middle of nowhere, Tanzania, out in the bush with wildlife everywhere, right back into North American culture with all of the...
It was a reverse culture shock.
Yeah.
So we just stayed home just to catch up with family, catch up with work for about, I think about 6 weeks. And then we were trying to plan our next, we weren't done. We were trying to plan our next trip.
Yeah.
And that was to Scotland.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What year are we at this point?
2017.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so you guys were home for a little bit and then you headed back to Europe. And were you continuing to think like, oh, we're going to continue being nomadic, continue growing the blog? Like, that's still the path you guys are on at this point?
Yeah. At no point during this time did we have intentions to stop traveling. We were just, we were trying to travel a little slower, maybe not exhaust ourselves out so much, but we were still very much into traveling wherever we could.
Nice. That's amazing. And so at what point were you thinking, okay, maybe we want more of a home base? Where did that come into play?
That was about 1.5 to 2 years later, and at the very end of 2018. You could.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I think after a while, like, it kind of starts wearing down on your body physically. So I was feeling like I hadn't been exercising regularly like we used to. We didn't really have hobbies. Like, it was kind of travel used to be our hobby. And then as travel turned into work, it kind of felt like, well, what is our hobby? Like, what do we do? So we decided around 2018 that we would do a snowboard trip. We'd gone snowboarding once or twice back when we lived in New York. I was like, well, we've got this blog, let's do this big trip. So we planned, I'd say, 18 ski resorts we probably visited over the course of one winter.
Wow.
So we're like, okay, we're going to do this. We're just going to go all in. So we went from, Italy, Austria, Switzerland, flew over to, we even did Liechtenstein too.
Yeah.
A little ski resort there. And then flew over to Canada, and we skied in Western Canada. And like, I think that semblance of having a hobby was like, oh, I like this. I miss this. Like, I want to live maybe more of another lifestyle where I can have hobbies outside of just travel.
Yeah. Yeah, so we flew to Western Canada. We traveled around the U.S., hitting up Colorado, Idaho, Montana, just snowboarding the whole way. And then we went after we were back in North America, and then we left again to go travel. This time we went to around Asia. And then I think we did another 6 months from there, and I think December 2018 is when we decided we needed a home base. And we debated between two places, and that was based purely on snow powder snowboarding, because we had really fallen in love with this hobby. And so we debated between Hokkaido in Japan and Western Canada. Now we're in Canada.
Yeah, as we
Suck it, Japan.
Just kidding. We love Japan. We all love Japan. Please let us in soon. I'm curious why Canada over Japan. I mean, being Canadian, I feel like, Canada's obviously very beautiful, but Japan is like so cool. So much cooler than Canada.
Japan just posed, like, one, we're very far from our family there. So, like, if we wanted to spend a long time there, we needed to be closer, I feel like, to family. Like, they weren't stoked about the idea of Japan. Like, I remember telling them, like, we're thinking about going to Japan or Canada. They're like, well, Canada sounds nice.
Yeah. Japan was a very nice short-term solution, but I think long-term, it really wasn't viable to call Japan home
Yeah, and there's also what we've been missing too. Another thing that kind of suffers with long-term travel is like relationships. So we hadn't had like that friend base or that community, or felt like we could be a part of something like that, like you can when you're, you have a home, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
But Japan, we've heard from a lot of people that can be very isolating at times because their culture is very closed off and they're not always welcoming to foreigners. So
Well, you don't speak the language.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
And we didn't know any Japanese, so.
For sure.
I think Canada was a great choice because it's North American culture, and we can make friends very easily. We can engage in these mountain activities, get outside as much as we want, but it still feels like a different country than living in the U.S. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what was it like, that feeling of like signing a lease and like having a place to call your own for a year instead of a couple weeks?
We landed on Christmas Day, 2018 in Calgary, and that's because it was the cheapest flight we could get because it was Christmas. So we flew on Christmas we were actually in Japan enjoying the snow there, and we flew here, and I remember getting to Calgary and thinking, I gave up traveling for this. Like Calgary in the winter,
Now our Calgary audience is angry.
Sorry, Calgary.
We've got Japanese angry. We've got the Calgarians angry.
I think we've made it up to the Japanese.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
No, we did end up falling. We realized we went to Canmore, which is where we are currently living, which is about an hour away from Calgary in the mountains. And then I was like, oh, okay, like, this is nice. Sorry, Calgary, we love you, but
It's actually kind of funny. I don't know when this actually happened, but a while ago we were flying back into Calgary, and they've changed the name of the Calgary airport to like the Calgary Banff Airport.
oh,
And I was like, it's like not really that close to Banff.
Like, that's a little deceiving.
That's a bit of a stretch.
It's like clearly most of the tourism for Calgary is wanting to go to Banff.
yep. Guess you know where most of the international travelers are going.
Yeah, exactly.
But then, yeah, I imagine, so like, I remember kind of distinctly, we had done kind of our first big stretch of nomadic travel was 8 months in Asia and kind of moving more quickly. And then we came back here for the summer and had a place we had got for, I think, 3 or 4 months. And it was like a full house. And it was just like, I don't know, it's obviously something you were used to before, but then coming back to it after traveling so long, and it's like, hey, it's our own space. It's so long. We can like buy things. It feels like so nice. Did you guys have kind of that feeling as well?
Absolutely. It was so relieving. Like the first beginning part when you land and you get here, it's stressful because you're moving into a new place. We hadn't even seen the place. We signed the lease virtually and there was almost no photos of it online. So we're like, I hope this is nice. Luckily, it turned out it was a great decision and a good lease. But yeah, we just started, once you get past that first 2 weeks of that shell shock of like settling down, it was really relaxing. Like it was relieving.
It did feel weird because we arrived with 2 suitcases and snowboard bags, and we had to furnish a place, right? We didn't have any belongings really, and so going to IKEA and spending money on things like a couch and a bed, that was kind of scary. Like, how long are we going to keep this bed? Is this worth the money? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much. What if we have to sell this again?
What if we have to go traveling again? What if this isn't for us? So it was this unknown decision that ultimately we've enjoyed. We've enjoyed having a home base.
Mm-hmm. So you guys have been in Canmore now, and I'm just trying to do math in my head, for almost 2 years.
Yep, exactly. So we'll hit our 2-year mark in, I guess, January 1st is when we signed our lease. And the idea, I mean, we weren't done with traveling. Now it had become our jobs and it was our business. So the idea was we would live in this awesome mountain town for half the year and then travel for half the year too, coming back and forth to a place with fiber internet, a place with the bed that's yours, in between.
Yeah, and it was a way for us to kind of get back to kind of reconnect with traveling. Like, it doesn't seem like it would make sense to settle down to reconnect with traveling. But for us, it was able to delineate that job and traveling again. So when we took our trips, we were able to just kind of relax. And like, we'd go out and we'd take photos and we'd make the most of each day. So at the end of like that 3-month trip we took, we'd come back home and then we could work and we'd digest all the content and relax.
Yeah, that's true. I remember we took one trip and I was like, oh, we're not even gonna bring the laptops. Because we didn't have to, because we weren't traveling on this never-ending adventure. We could come back home and then work. We could actually enjoy the moment a little more.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it definitely is hard to balance. I think that's something we've also found, and everything that you've talked about, like, we can really relate to too, like craving a home base, like a bed that's yours, a place that's yours, some stuff that's yours. It's so weird because I feel like I have this dichotomy in me that's like, I love kind of just being responsible for very few possessions, but then I also really like having stuff that's mine. So I feel like my brain kind of battles between those two. And same with, community and stuff like that. I love exploring new places, but it's so great to actually like have a group of friends, which is really hard to maintain when you're on the go all the time.
Yeah.
It was so nice getting your own pillow. Like, I don't know if you have this problem, but sometimes when you stay in places, the pillows are crap. So when you get to pick your pillow and you're like, I'll never forget us being in the store. We were like trying every pillow out. We're like, we're going to find the perfect pillow.
Yeah.
Like, our bed has to be comfortable on because, it's hit or miss sometimes when you're traveling.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I actually just splurged on a pillow. I feel like with COVID, I was like, okay, well, I can't leave for a bit, so might as well, buy a nice pillow. And it's been a game changer. I've taken it actually on all of my little trips that we've taken this summer. So now I'm like that person who takes a pillow with them. Yeah.
Stuffed animal.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Oh, but yeah, I can really relate to that. And I feel like for us, something we've talked about is kind of, you need to have that structure and that stability in your life to be able to enjoy the freedom and adventure. Because if your life kind of becomes on the move all the time, those smaller annoyances they grind at you. Whereas if you're at home and you feel kind of comfortable and structured and productive, then when you go out traveling and there's I don't know, funny things happening, the border guards are weird, all this stuff becomes part of the adventure, and it's enjoyable in a way that it's not if that's all your life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because after 4 years of pretty much nonstop traveling, I found that little things were starting to irritate me. Like what you said, or if I had to wait in a line, I'd be like, oh, I just don't want to wait in this line, or that person looked at, the smallest things. I got really on edge just from living this nonstop life, and
even finding a cup of coffee can be exhausting sometimes. It's like, oh, this coffee sucks, and
looking for restaurants. You want to make sure it's a good restaurant. You always have to look for a good restaurant. Like that, they sound so minimal, but it just ate at you a little bit. And then when we actually settled down, it gave us that time to chill out, realize we were way too on edge, and it's been great.
Yeah. I think something else that's really cool, I think sometimes maybe you hear this if you're someone who hasn't had that chance to go out and travel for a long period of time, but having the ability to do that and then create a bit more of a structure, or maybe set up a home base, it makes you appreciate it so much more in a way that you kind of didn't before you spent so much time living nomadically.
Yeah, for sure. When we were full-time traveling, we would wake up and everything, it felt more like a chore, to go get coffee. But now when we travel, just on from home, or when we were traveling and have this home base, it's a nice thing to go get coffee. It doesn't feel like your everyday lifestyle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if the coffee is not the best coffee, it's easier to brush it off because it's not your everyday experience. You'll go home to the coffee that you love at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so what does the future hold in terms of travel plans for you guys?
Question of the year
question
for travelers
for
in 2020.
Before COVID hit, we had plans to go travel around the South Pacific. That was our next big trip. We were going to do a 2-month trip. And then we also wanted to check out some more places that we hadn't been yet. Ethiopia was high on our list. So was Sudan, India, and Nepal.
yeah.
And those are some of our.
We really felt like last year we'd hit that stride. Like we'd found that right balance of like having a structured home and traveling. So we were looking forward to it this year in 2020. And then, well, we all know what happened.
Yeah. So right now we're in a waiting game like everyone else. We're waiting to see when the borders will open, when maybe we'll get a vaccine, and we're very much itching to travel. I mean, Canada and the mountains are great. We're very fortunate to be stuck in such a beautiful part of the world. But as travelers by nature, we want to go somewhere.
For sure, yeah.
I think we feel that. I'm sure pretty much everyone listening is also feeling the same thing.
When can we go?
Yeah, when can we go? Where can we go? Can we book a trip? All that type of stuff. So hopefully borders will open soon and we can get on our way again.
Yeah.
Amazing. This conversation has been so awesome. If people want to check out your blog, follow along with you guys, where can they go to find you?
They can go to theworldpursuit.com, or all of our social handles are at The World Pursuit.
Amazing. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for
guys.
having us. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanderers Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.